Welcome back, Ryder Rangers, and happy 4th of July. I just thought I had my American flag sunglasses, but I couldn't find them, so I just opted in for regular sunglasses. So, welcome to the long awaited Legends of Ufology on William Bill Moore, Part 2. It's been a while since I did part 1, and you guys probably forgot about part 1 of the show that I did like 2 months ago, but I said that I was going to finish up this 5-hour long MUFON 1989 Bill Moore speech that he was making at this conference. And what better time than on America's birthday? America! And there's nothing more American than uncover the most UFO deception operation that's been going on since 1979, and give you the guy that tried to tell you that everything within ufology was a complete and utter fabrication. And all has its roots in the Paul Benowitz deception operation from the Air Force and the NSA that ended up driving Paul Benowitz out of his mind and led to his psychiatric hospitalization. So, America, happy birthday, America. Boom, baby. Let's go. Woo! Yeah, baby, America. Jesus Christ. No one wants to admit that we peaked as a nation in 2001 with that Limp Bizkit clip right there. Limp Bizkit playing the intro to Undertaker at WrestleMania. And also another really great one is that Creed performance playing the halftime show for the Cowboys, also in 2001, on Thanksgiving, I believe, in 2001, early 2000s. Those were the days, folks. Those were the days. But I guess everybody's generation, they reminisce back to the days when they were young and think that their generation was the best generation. So if you're new to this channel or you're new to this series, Legends of Ufology is where we take a critical look at the UFO subject with people and events that popularized ufology from the very beginning. And this is the 4th episode of this series, and there's a playlist on the channel. You just go to the main channel, Raised by Giants, scroll over through the tabs, hit playlist, and this is the 4th one. And there's also a playlist over there of the UFO Doomsday Cult series that I did, I think 13 shows on those cults. People have been asking me to bring back that cult series, but I've kind of ran out of cults to cover. I think I covered like the bulk of them, besides like Scientology and Mormonism and some of those, but such a deep rabbit hole on those. And then there's also the Process Church, but Process Church isn't a UFO cult, but I will be talking a little bit about the process next week. So welcome everyone in the chat. Good to see you. Any moderators, members out there, thanks for joining in. Hopefully this wasn't a bad time on the 4th of July to do this show. Sam, how's it going? Tim, what's up? Noble Truth, what's up? Holding it down for the Ryder Ranger channel members, baby. Become a Ryder Ranger channel member today and help support the show monthly. And you'll get access to those bonus episodes as a token of your support for less than a cup of coffee a month. And thanks for all the people that are Ryder Ranger channel members. It really helps out a lot. And also Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal links are in the description. Buy Me a Coffee's been lacking, been lonely. Buy Me Coffee's been lonely over there. So if you guys get a chance and you have the opportunity to support the show, please do. There's multiple ways to do it. You can become the channel member, which is $4.99 a month. To get access to bonus episodes, and you also get a little badge thing and a little identification thing by your chat name, and PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee. Buy Me a Coffee also has a like a monthly setup membership as well, so you can choose to do it like that as well if you would like to do that. But most importantly, if you would like to contribute but you don't want to become a channel member or can't, you can always just share the video out. Hit the thumbs up button. Lets YouTube know that you want to continue to see my videos, and leaving a comment helps boost engagement. Even if it's just emojis, guys, just try and help out any way you can. Anything is very much appreciated. And it is conspiracy burrito time, guys. You guys ready for the conspiracy burrito? When regular conspiracies aren't working out, make yourself a conspiracy burrito. Wrap up all of your favorite conspiracies all into one tasty burrito. Secret space program, directed energy weapons, evil reptilians, abduction, CIA mind control, remote viewing, Mandela effect, the Philadelphia experiment, space Nazis, mud flood, Tartaria, time travel, reverse engineer technology from extraterrestrials, underground bases, Antarctica, the Montauk Project. Wrap up all of your favorite conspiracies into your very own conspiracy burrito. Yum. Damn conspiracy burritos are so tasty. They're so good. So last time we covered about an hour and a half of the William Moore MUFON Conference in 1989. During his speech or presentation or whatever you want to call it, that William Bill Moore was giving during that time is just, it's freaking timeless. Okay. It's just as important now as it was back then. And I'd argue even more important now, because when you realize that a majority of all of the mythology that's been talked about within ufology for, let's say, the past 4 decades has been created by the government to cover up real projects and real operations, more specifically the Air Force and the NSA, you start to see why there's so much garbage out there that's just floating around in the community. So we're going to pick back up on this William Moore discussion from 1989 at the MUFON conference. And if you haven't seen part 1 of this, you can feel free to listen to the rest of this and go back and listen to part 1. It's on it's a playlist. It's it's Legends of Ufology, Whitley Strieber, because half of it was Whitley Strieber and the second half of it was concentrated on Bill Moore. So we're going to jump into this bad boy and finish this thing up. And a reminder that this is covered under fair use under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowances made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. And that is what we're going to be doing here today. It is commenting on the William Bill Moore MUFON Conference of 1989, where he's spilling the beans, baby, spilling the beans on the whole Paul Benowitz affair and everything that's been going on in ufology up until that point. Throw this banner up. And if you guys can't hear this, there's nothing that I can do about the sound. This is an old recording, and it's been actually recorded off of the original copy from a VHS copy. So the audio isn't the best, but I've tried to turn it up as loud as it can get. So here we go.
I knew at that time that he was not far from an inevitable nervous collapse. His health.
And what he's talking about here is Paul Benowitz. They're basically driving Paul Benowitz out of his mind. If you're not familiar with the Benowitz case, I covered it in part 2 of Legends of Ufology, Paul Benowitz. Don't really want to go over that whole thing again, but pretty much Paul Benowitz lived next to Kirkland Air Force Base. He was capturing what he thought was UFOs, which actually turned out to be advanced military programs where they were testing advanced military craft. He contacted the Air Force. He was also getting other weird signals. He was a radio expert. He worked for the military during World War II as a radio electronics engineer, and he designed this antenna to try and capture radio signals that were coming in and out of Kirkland Air Force Base. And then he supposedly decoded these transmissions, and then he thought that it had to do with aliens and extraterrestrials. So then he went to Kirkland Air Force Base to give a presentation on the things that he had found, and Kirkland put him in contact with this man named Richard Doty, which I've had Richard Doty on the show. I've interviewed him. And Richard Doty came to him and basically put him in this direction of extraterrestrials. And then later on, they found out that the NSA had broken into Paul Benowitz's house and replaced his computer with an NSA modified computer in order to send him messages that he thought he was getting from extraterrestrials. Then there's the whole Myrna Henson case, where Myrna Henson comes in, and then the Dulce, New Mexico underground extraterrestrial base And this is pretty much Bill Moore, because Bill Moore was involved with this along with Richard Doty. Richard Doty would have Bill Moore going to Paul Benowitz's house to try and talk to him, and then Paul would give him all this information. And pretty much what we discussed and what we heard Bill Moore talk about in the beginning of part one was he was saying that he was collecting all of this information and getting down to the bottom of all the mis and disinformation, and then this is him coming out about it. He's basically being a whistleblower at this point in front of this MUFON conference in 1989. All right, that's just a little background.
Deteriorated. He had lost considerable weight. His hand shook as if from palsy, and he looked terrible. I tried to counsel him to drop the entire UFO thing before his health was completely destroyed. He said he knew things were getting bad and he was trying to cope with it. Not long afterward, I heard he had been hospitalized and was under psychiatric care. Whether UFOs were actually...
Thank you, YouTube corrections officer. I appreciate you giving me the go-ahead to continue to play this video, because I am commenting over the video, and this is covered under fair use. This is a public information. This is instead of hearing or talking about what Bill Moore said, we are listening to Bill Moore himself and commenting over and critiquing the video.
Ever involved with all of this, and to what extent, I never really knew. Perhaps Paul had merely stumbled upon signals generated from some sophisticated high-level government project whose security people had hit upon UFO-related disinformation as their ultimate cover. Or
that's really important what he just said there. He said that basically Paul Benowitz found classified or got classified footage of top secret military aircraft, and then they went in and made him believe that it was extraterrestrial craft in order to cover up the fact that it's actual military craft.
Perhaps he had discovered a real, although somewhat less sensational government UFO project, if that's possible, which elected to disinform him to protect what they were really doing. I do know from firsthand experience that there was a tremendous amount of government disinformation involved, and that a large proportion of what we are hearing today about malevolent aliens, underground bases, secret treaties with the U.S. government has its roots firmly planted in the Benowitz affair.
Boom, mic drop. That is a huge mic drop. And these people are mad right now. These people do not want to hear this because they're all believers at this MUFON conference. And here Bill Moore is standing up and telling them that it's all bullshit. And we're going to see how he was treated here in a few minutes and what they basically did.
Stories of an alleged UFO crash at Aztec, New Mexico are also a part of this picture, but I'll save comment on that until later in this paper. In any case, from what I knew of all of this, its purpose was strictly to discredit Benowitz and nothing more. What amazes me...
Well, and to also get the ball rolling on the mythology of ufology and the alien contact stories and the underground bases, so that everyone will believe it and then carry it on into the future. So therefore, the government will never have to come clean about anything that they've been doing.
Is that nearly a decade later, these same stories continue to circulate. Recently, one of the most prominent figures in the current disinformation wave, which has been sweeping the UFO community, was quoted as having stated that he found Paul Benowitz's information to be 100% true. This person spent a couple of days talking to Benowitz back in the summer of 1987, and he has spent considerable time since spreading elaborate and increasingly sensationalistic stories based, he claims, on information gathered from a variety of unnamed sources.
I believe he's talking about Bill Cooper here. I could be wrong. I probably am wrong, but that would make sense because Bill Cooper talked about a lot of the same things that Paul Benowitz also talked about. But don't come at me if I'm wrong. May be completely wrong on that, but Bill Cooper basically said the exact same things, that there was this underground base in Dulce, New Mexico, that is a contract and a treaty with extraterrestrials, and that the extraterrestrials signed a contract with the government, which is the exact same things that Paul Benowitz sent a letter to Senator Harris and Schmidt and told him about all this stuff, which he got from Myrna Henson, which Myrna Henson turns out she's absolutely a 100%, in my study, in my research, a government agent that was sent to Paul Benowitz to purposely mis and disinform him.
Strip away the fluff, and what you have left is essentially the Benowitz story all over again. There is no question in my mind that it's mostly disinformation, pure and simple. And since I know that connections exist between those who are spreading it now and those who were spreading it then, both from the Benowitz angle and from within the intelligence community, it seems reasonable to conclude that those responsible for it are not satisfied their task has been completed even after all this time. Knowing what is going on, however, is simply not enough. The real question is why. It was just that question I asked myself when I first ran into the disinformation operation that was being run on Benowitz. It seemed to me at that time that I was in a rather unique position. There I was, with my foot literally in the door of a secret counterintelligence game that gave every appearance of being somehow directly connected to a high-level government UFO project. And judging by the positions of the people I knew to be directly involved with it, definitely had something to do with national security. There was no way I was going to allow the opportunity to pass me by without learning at least something about what was going on. Many ufologists have run up against disinformation over the years. Virtually all of them viewed it as a negative process and backed away from it either in anger or disgust as soon as they discovered what they were dealing with.
Which is a multi-layered, multifaceted mythology that has no basis in truth or no basis in reality. It's a hard thing to unravel.
Even today, the UFO community unanimously considers anyone known or suspected of dealing in disinformation to be one of the bad guys, someone to be shunned or avoided at all costs, and certainly never, ever to be believed. I, on the other hand, determined to take quite a different tack. I would play the disinformation game, get my hands dirty just often enough to lead those directing the process into believing that I was doing exactly what they wanted me to do. And all the while, continue to burrow my way into the matrix so as to learn as much as possible about who was directing it and why. It would be a classic case of turning the tables on the very ones who were most confident that they had the situation well in hand. There was just one thing I needed to do this: secrecy. I couldn't tell anyone about what I was doing. For if I did, and word got back to those in control, I would be immediately cut off and cast adrift before I could learn anything. It was a formidable problem. Some of the contacts I had made during the Benowitz affair seemed friendly and professed a desire to end the UFO cover-up and assist in getting government information on UFOs out to the public in a slow and methodical manner so as not to create panic. Others seemed more interested in obtaining information from me, often on what other members of the UFO community were doing, and sometimes on other completely unrelated subjects.
That's also what they do. They also like to keep tabs on people to see what they're talking about, what they're doing, how close they're getting to any kind of real information. That's really what Richard Doty's job was after the Benowitz, after he was done with his operation on Paul Benowitz, was to find out if any of these supposed ufologists had any kind of real information, any kind of real classified information and who that source was. He didn't really care about the person that was putting out the information. He cared about the person that was supplying the person that was putting out the information that could possibly be classified information, just like Paul Benowitz was doing, unknowingly thinking that this was extraterrestrial craft that he was getting, thinking that he was in communication with extraterrestrials and the aliens telling him that they're from a planet with no water and that they have a contract with the military and that they're in a base in deep underground military base in New Mexico.
Whatever information I managed to get from these individuals in return usually came as a result of asking just the right questions in just the right ways. Sometimes it took months or even years of establishing a relationship with someone before anything useful came from it. The most difficult part of it all was trying to determine what was real and what was bullshit.
We still got that problem today, Bill. We still got that problem. That is a never-ending problem, Bill.
One of the key factors in any successful disinformation scheme is that it must contain some elements of truth in order to make it credible. Knowing that, however, is one thing. Doing something with it is quite another. When you're dealing with what you know to be a classified program, and you're determined to get information without breaking any laws and running afoul of national security, you're walking a very fine line. And that's why it takes a long time to get results. In June of 1982, I approached my friend Jamie Chandray and brought him into the project. At that time, I also began briefing Stanton as to what was going on. Both of them knew that I was in contact with a number of people within the intelligence community on the subject of UFOs. And both were aware that at least some of the information coming through was disinformation. But both only had minimal knowledge of the private goals and conclusions I had established some months earlier. As the project progressed, this actually turned out to be more of an asset than a drawback. Indeed, the three of us were an excellent team in that we each approached the problem from a different angle. From my point of view, the process was one of slowly and methodically burrowing into a beehive from the outside with the goal of ultimately reaching the queen bee and the royal jelly at the center. Since I never knew whether the other bees I was certain to meet along the way would be friendly or not, I had to proceed cautiously, both in order to avoid getting stung and to learn as much as possible about what might lie ahead. The control factor, as I saw it, rested largely with me and the way I proceeded. Jamie, on the other hand, saw it as a somewhat different process. He too felt we were burrowing into a beehive. But in his view of things, our burrowing was at the express invitation of the queen bee herself, who clandestinely oversaw and encouraged the process from a distance as part of her private plan to get free of politics that surrounds and restrains her. As long as we followed the signposts along the way, Jamie felt, the learning process would continue and we could never get stung. Stanton, as the scientist of the group, was the one best qualified to conduct a careful and organized search for corroborating witnesses and evidence in places outside of the loop Jamie and I were part of.
He's talking about Stanton Friedman here.
And by the way, just as a matter of personal privilege here, I would like to react to a nasty comment about Stanton which appeared in a recent issue of Jim Mosley's Saucer Smear newsletter. In this comment, the writer, after first characterizing Stanton as a gullible individual, went on to wonder whether he could be trusted to expose the MJ-12 documents as phony if his research turned up conclusive evidence to that effect. It's a legitimate question, and I'd like to answer it by stating that not only Stanton, but all of us are firmly committed to releasing a full and complete report on this matter. If evidence should come to light suggesting that the documents are phony, you have my firm assurance that it will most certainly be included in the report.
The documents are phony. They're fake documents. Black Vault has done an analysis on the MJ-12 documents and seen that the seal that was used in the MJ-12 documents was not the official stamp and seal that's on other records.
Ability is not an issue here.
John Greenwald from the Black Vault.
The matter is far larger than that. In any case, Stanton, Jamie, and I are all working toward the same goal, that of trying to discover what is truth and what isn't with respect to the government and UFOs. My role in the Benowitz affair had at least secured me a seat in the right theater. From there, it was only a question of whether I could use my balcony ticket to discover who owned the place and was making the major operational decisions. Both Jamie and I felt that in order to have any hope of success at all, we absolutely had to play the game according to their rules. That meant doing everything possible to give the appearance that we were essentially useful idiots who would cause no trouble, while at the same time playing the double game of keeping our eyes and ears open in order to learn as much as we could about what was going on.
Bill here is trying to hit him with the double-double. Secret agent. Secret double agent. William Bill Moore right here. Which is a great service. He did a great service to people for coming forward with this information.
In so doing, we were gradually able to expand our base of friendly contact people while working our way further and further into the truly bizarre intelligence labyrinth that surrounds the subject of UFOs. I have no problem in telling you that it's been a tedious, time and resource-consuming task which has been made all the more difficult by the constant barrage of rocks, hoots, and bottles thrown in our direction from a segment of the UFO community, which out of ignorance chose to take up unfriendly and unsympathetic positions toward us.
Man, I feel that statement so well, Bill Moore. Feel that, bro. Feel it so good.
Were it not for the fact that we were constantly challenged by the twists and turns of our project and by the hope that we could ultimately come away from it with a smoking gun in hand, I'm convinced we would have thrown in the towel a long time ago. Indeed, I must admit that there were several occasions when we tried to do just that, only to be encouraged to continue by some of our friends from the inside who had come to believe in what we were doing and respected us for it. The anonymous arrival of the so-called MJ-12 documents in December of 1984 was another factor we had to contend with in this increasingly confusing web. The problem of their origin and authenticity was and remains a major issue. And on this...
It remained an issue in 1989, but the issue has since been solved. They're fake.
At this point, our position of neutrality has constantly been misinterpreted. Therefore, for the record, it is important to point out here once again that at no time have either I or any of my associates ever stated that these documents are authentic. Our position has consistently been that we do not know whether they are authentic, but that we as investigators remain unaware of any convincing evidence which would suggest that they are not. That position remains essentially unchanged today, and I'll have more to say about it when I get to the end of this paper. The bottom line, however, is that authentic or not, the story of the documents is a major story, and one which, as I've already assured you, will ultimately be told when the time is ready to tell it.
That's what they want, though. That's why they release fake documents for the community to believe in, is because it's such a big story. It's so fantastical. It's so amazing that people want to believe in it, and they do end up believing in it. I mean, that's the point of releasing the fake documents, is to cover up something else that's going on. That's the whole purpose.
That process has already taken considerably longer than I had thought it would. I cannot predict when it will be complete, but I can say that progress has been made, and I, for one, certainly hope it won't be too much longer. For the many of you who have roundly criticized our methodology throughout the MJ-12 controversy, it seems important to note here that what you were witnessing was the operation of a plan to put out just enough of this bizarre information to attract attention, and then carefully monitor who showed up with questions to ask or information to offer. Once
It's exactly like the cattle mutilation conference that Paul Benowitz got involved with in the very beginning. That was all set up by the intelligence community for people to come in and ask questions about the cattle mutilations and connect it to ETs and extraterrestrials, and that's what everyone believed.
again, I was careful to state that I remained unconvinced of the authenticity of the information involved. In the case of the Falcon and Condor interviews broadcast last October on UFO Cover-Up Live, I'm convinced that at least some of that information falls under the category of disinformation. I'm equally convinced that some of it is true. The important point here is that regardless of whether it is disinformation or truth, it does have to do with UFOs. And the sources who provided it felt that doing so was important enough to risk going before national television in order to accomplish that purpose. Remember also that those sources knew that Falcon and Condor would be identified on the show as confidential government informants. The risk was all theirs, not ours. And still they went ahead, just as they are currently going ahead with the process of arranging a meeting which will enable them to tell their stories before one or more members of Congress. I submit to you that such a process is extraordinary.
That's really interesting because that gets into like, do these whistleblowers out there that are, testifying before Congress and saying that they know all about the aliens and all of the crashed UFO wreckage, like Dave Grush, do they know that it's fake? Do they know that it's made up nonsense and they're doing it anyway? Or have they been convinced that it's real? And I'm in that camp. I think that a lot of these people have been convinced that this stuff is real, so they go out and they tell people that it is real. The exact same way that the Air Force did to Paul Benowitz and that the NSA did to Paul Benowitz. He was convinced that it was extraterrestrials that he was capturing on his camera, extraterrestrial craft. He was convinced that he was in communication with extraterrestrials through his computer. He didn't know that it was bogus. So therefore, when he went out into the community and talked to all these other UFO researchers and other people within ufology, he spoke it as if it was real. He had conviction behind it. And I don't think that a lot of these people know that what they're talking about is nonsense and it's made up. It's fake information. It's dis, and deception operations that are being run. I really don't think that they're essentially useful idiots. That's what I think is going on. I don't think that a majority of them are intentionally deceiving people. They're doing it unknowingly because they have, Dave Grush has said multiple times that the information that he has is from people telling him stories. There's no evidence behind any of his claims. Where is his evidence? Show us the evidence, release the evidence of the things that you're saying, but he can't because all he has is stories. Second, third, and fourth hand stories from people that have cultivated this narrative in a circular reporting fashion.
Regardless of the truth or deception involved. And I think it's high time the UFO community stopped throwing rocks at it and began to consider the implications. One thing I can assure you is that rocks or not, our project will continue. You can either become involved, as others in the UFO community have done, or you can sit back and wait for results. Whatever those results, good, bad, positive, or negative, you will hear about them. Our trolling of the bait by means of a progressive release of information and ultimately by arranging for Falcon and Condor to appear on the UFO Cover-Up Live show produced a variety of interesting results. Shortly after the show, the FBI showed up and began asking questions about it. They even arranged for a private showing in the office of producer Michael Seligman. Agents on both East and West Coasts interviewed a number of ufologists and other people, including Jamie Chandray. But although I let it be known that I'd be more than happy to talk to them, they avoided me.
Again, that is done to figure out if they have any kind of classified top secret military information and who's leaking that information out to the public. That's why they're interviewing these ufologists. That's why the FBI is interested. They're not interested because it's extraterrestrials and these people supposedly have contact with extraterrestrials. No, they're not doing that. That is not the case. They're interviewing and talking to these people to try and find out what kind of information they know and who is supplying them with the information from the military. And people think that that has to do with aliens because they believe in aliens and that aliens are in contact and have some kind of contract with the military to abduct people and cattle mutilations and underground bases. But that's not the case. That's all made up. The real thing that they're looking for is, do people have classified top secret information about advanced military craft or advanced top secret military operations?
This I found to be particularly interesting in light of the FBI's admission in response to a FOIA request that they have nearly 60 pages of material on me that is all classified for reasons of national security. That was in July of 1988. I still have no idea what those pages contain. Another thing that occurred, as we had hoped it would, was that a rather small number of people came out of the woodwork claiming to have inside knowledge of one type or another about MJ-12 or similar government UFO projects. After weeding out the obvious cranks and several others whose claims did not check out, or whose stories changed every time they told them, we were left with a few leads which seemed promising. It's premature to offer you a report on these at this time because we're still checking. Also, seemingly in direct relationship to our partial release of MJ-12 material 2 years ago, the flow of UFO
What's up? Welcome to the show. Good to see you.
has escalated from a point of near insignificance to what has become almost a flood tide. Indeed, many of you in the audience came here tonight looking for answers to questions related.
For anybody that's just joining in, we are covering the second part of the William Bill Moore MUFON Conference lecture / speaking engagement that William Moore was giving in 1989 to the MUFON Conference.
Related directly to that problem. As I have taken great pains to point out, the current crop of disinformation is really nothing new. It's just that a different crop of people are spreading it this time around.
Oh my God, wow. What he just said there is so on point. He's hitting every single thing within this community. It's just a different crop of people spreading the exact same information, which is exactly what Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick said in his Arrow report of the historical UFO record report that Arrow just released about a month ago. That is just the same group of people. Well, it's the same information with a different group of people. The same content that's being regurgitated and twisted and turned into something different with, turned into something that's the same, but with different people reporting on it. It's the exact same thing. We see this all the time, not even within the ufological circles, but with everything. Like you'll see CERN pop up again every couple of years. You'll see things about the Bermuda Triangle pop up every once in a while. You know, it's the same thing that's regurgitated constantly for a new audience and to rope new people in that might not have been familiar with it to begin with.
I expect that those responsible, not the rumor mongers themselves, but the ones who are feeding them, thought it would work just as well this time as it did last. The one thing I'm sure they didn't count on is that I would tell my story and thus blow their cover.
Nobody counted on that, Bill. No one's seen this thing coming, bro. No one's seen this coming, and they're mad. They're pissed right now.
And speaking of blowing cover,
you hear that heckler in the background? He's heckling.
And speaking of blowing cover,
he is being heckled to the core here.
Of blowing cover, I think it's high time that I tell you what I know about another situation that has found its way into the current crop of UFO disinformation. I offer this not to embarrass the person involved, but rather to shed light on an incident which, by the accounts of it, have appeared recently in a variety of...
Everyone's a super soldier, and don't you know, I remember you from the secret space program. I had a dream about you, girl. I know that you were there. I know, I remember you. I remember you from something. That's how it goes.
UFO newsletters and at least one new book. Aztec rumor. Rick indicated he'd do nothing about the matter and asked me to tell him everything I could. I did so, and as I recall, he took some notes. We discussed a number of other things as well. Some months later, in early 1983, I became aware that Rick was involved with a team of several others, including one fellow from Denver that I knew of, and at least one who was working out of Washington, D.C., in playing an elaborate disinformation game against a prominent cattle mutilation researcher who, at the time, had close connections with a major television film company interested in doing a UFO documentary.
He's talking about Linda Moulton Howe here. That's Linda Moulton Howe.
Although I was not in a position to know everything about what was going on, I had access to enough of it to conclude that the government seemed hell-bent on severing the ties that existed between the researcher and the film company. My understanding was that because the researcher was known to have close ties to Benowitz and had exhibited a strong interest in his work, certain elements within the intelligence community were concerned that the story of his having intercepted electromagnetic emissions from the Kirtland-Sandia area would end up as part of the script of a feature film. Since
it had nothing to do with the cattle or the cattle mutilations or the aliens. It had to do with the top secret military installation that had to do with lasers and Paul intercepting actual military technology signals. That's why they were going after Linda Moulton Howe. And Richard Doty actually said that in our interview together. If you guys would like to go back and listen to that, if you haven't already listened to it.
This in turn might influence others, possibly even the Soviets, to attempt similar interceptions. Someone in a control position apparently felt it had to be stopped before it got out of hand. In any case, the prime objective of the counterintelligence people who swarmed around Benowitz between 1980 and 84 seemed to be the maintenance of a high-level security net around the radio signals he was intercepting. I was unable to determine why this was a priority at the time, and I still do not know today. What I do know, however, is that since they couldn't physically stop Paul from intercepting these signals, and since they hadn't been successful in enlisting his voluntary silence, they fell back on a wall of disinformation.
Haha, it's funny,
to
man.
confuse the issue, and ultimately to call his credibility into question. When the filmmaker appeared on the scene, and it looked as if Paul's story might become part of the script, the counterintelligence people simply extended their disinformation activities accordingly. Part of this game involved a meeting between the cattle mutilation researcher in question Agent Richard Doty, and others at the AFOSI office at Kirtland Air Force Base, wherein the researchers subsequently claimed to have been allowed to view certain purportedly sensitive documents about the government's alleged involvement with UFOs.
This is when Richard Doty gave Linda Moulton Howe a completely fake and fabricated document for her to read over. Richard Doty also talked about this in our interview together as well.
Part of this material included information about an alleged UFO crash retrieval at Aztec. Richard Doty, who's bound by a security oath, cannot, and I am told will not, discuss this matter, except to say that he broke no laws and gave away no secrets that day. That, insofar as I'm aware, is entirely correct. I, on the other hand, was never required to sign a security oath, and am therefore breaking no laws when I tell you quite candidly that the information which changed hands on that day was directly descended from the discussion Doty and I had had only a few months earlier. I can also tell you that it was a very effective deception, because the researcher involved continues to believe this information and actively continues to try to convince others of its truth even now, more than 6 years after the fact.
Whoa, damn. Hitting Linda hard right there, Bill. Shit.
Unfortunately, there was no UFO crash at Aztec, nor was there much truth to any of the other material supplied to this particular researcher, either at that meeting or during later encounters. The much-touted alien harvest is really a dismal crop failure. To the best of my knowledge, it was all disinformation, and I was the unfortunate one who had unwittingly supplied the fuel to those who were spreading the fire. I've held my silence on this matter for more than 6 years.
So what he's saying is that he was talking with Richard Doty prior to Richard Doty meeting with Linda Moulton Howe, that gave Richard Doty the idea to give Linda Moulton Howe all this fake information that Bill Moore was talking to Richard Doty about before. Oh, yeah, it's wild. And this is according to him. I don't know how much. I think Richard Doty said that he didn't know anything about the document, or that the document was given to him and he didn't read it or something like that. But who knows? Who knows? I definitely believe everything that Bill Moore is saying over anything that Richard Doty says, for sure.
Now you know the truth. Disinformation is a strange and bizarre game. Those who play it are completely aware that an operation's success is dependent upon dropping information upon a target or mark in such a way that the person will accept it as truth and will repeat and even defend it to others as if it were true. Once this has been accomplished,
Major heckler.
we certainly have a number of rude people in this audience. That's too bad.
Ooh, get him, Bill.
Once this has been accomplished, the work of the counterintelligence specialist is complete. They can simply withdraw in the confidence that the dirty work of spreading their poison seeds will be done by others. Those who want proof of how well the process works need only look around you. Every time one of you repeats an unverified or unsubstantiated bit of information without qualifying it as such, you are contributing to that process. And every time you do it, somebody in a need-to-know position sits back and has a horse laugh at your expense.
Oh my God. Did you just listen to what he just said right there? Holy crap. That is the best words that I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, I've said that similarly, but not in the same words as he just said it. That was put beautifully. Beautifully. Rewind that and listen to that part again. Holy crap.
One final comment on the Aztec hoax is that 2 other individuals who self-published a voluminous book, UFO Crash at Aztec, on the affair in 1987, chose to completely omit any mention of my extensive research on the case, which had been published 2 years earlier, and which both researchers had copies of. It's a
Absolutely, we are. Welcome to the show. Like I've said, the conspiracies are the conspiracy. It's the easiest way to put it.
Classic case of the book's principal author having decided that what his conclusion would be before even beginning the process of investigating, and then ignoring everything which didn't fit. One of the problems the ufology movement has with its image is that there are a significant number of people involved with it who not only support this sort of journalism, but encourage it. The next section of this presentation will deal with questions and answers, but the format will be a bit different, in that I will not take questions from the audience, but have elected to incorporate a number of questions and their answers directly into the body of this paper. Question number 1. Am I currently involved with providing information to any government agency about UFOs or about people involved with the UFO phenomenon? Answer: no. I have not had any such involvement since 1984.
Heckling starting. Man, they're mad. They're pissed. Oh my God. Oh my God. Booing him.
Frankly, I'm a little ashamed of some people in this audience, regardless of what you believe, what you hear, or not. This is not a debate. It is a paper trying to be presented. Now, please show a little courtesy.
Thank you.
Whew. Got him. They were pissed. Oh my God. Their entire belief system and structure has just been shattered to the core, which is so sad because William Bill Moore here, after this presentation that he's giving at MUFON in 1989, he just completely leaves the scene. No one's heard from him since. And it's like, holy crap, dude, they battered him.
I'll repeat that question.
That's what belief gets you, folks. That's why when you believe in something so heavily and then evidence comes out against your belief and you don't want to believe it, so therefore you attack the individual and heckle the individual.
Am I currently involved with providing information to any government agency about UFOs or about people involved with the UFO phenomenon? Answer: no. I have not had any such involvement since 1984. The extent and the scope of that involvement were essentially as I have already outlined to you and nothing more. Question 2. Am I presently involved in knowingly spreading any sort of disinformation about UFOs? Answer: no. The only conscious involvement I have ever had with a disinformation operation was that which I have already outlined in connection with the Benowitz case. Question 3. Am I presently or have I ever been on the payroll of any agency of the U.S. government?
But he did write an entire book on the Roswell incident called The Roswell Incident in the early 80s that was filled full of mis and disinformation about the Roswell wreckage and crash that people still believe to this very day. But I think that the identifying mark in his statement right there was saying, did he knowingly? He probably didn't know that that was mis and disinformation in that book. It's like what I was mentioning earlier. Do these people that are touting the UFO and extraterrestrial hypothesis know that they're deceiving people and intentionally misinforming and disinforming people? They probably don't. So the distincting factor of him saying that, did he knowingly miss or disinform or give anybody any kind of deception relating to UFOs or extraterrestrials? He's probably correct in saying that.
No. Question 4. What about my involvement with UFO researcher Lee Graham? Answer. Earlier in this paper, I told you of how I was recruited to supply information on Mr. Benowitz in 1980. The exact wording of my statement was, Benowitz, and to a lesser extent, several other individuals. One of those other individuals was Lee Graham. This began in 1983, if memory serves. It's important to note here that in addition to being a UFO researcher, Lee is also an avid military aircraft buff. As far as I'm aware, the counterintelligence people were primarily interested in him because at the time, Lee was making a lot of inquiries and collecting a great deal of information on the then very highly classified stealth aircraft program.
Noble truth. Do people recruit through belief or money these days? I think it's a little bit of both. The cults recruit through belief and the grifters recruit through money. Double-edged sword.
Apparently there was some question as to why he was so interested in obtaining information on so sensitive a subject. In other words, was he using it solely to satisfy a personal curiosity? Or was he passing it on to others who perhaps had foreign intelligence connections? There seemed to be only minimal interest in his UFO activities. Lee is a completely above-board individual who is a loyal U.S. citizen. In the process of keeping in touch with him, we became good friends. His knowledge of the fact that I had friends in the intelligence community gradually evolved into the firm belief on his part that I was much more than I really was. The ID card story, which has become the subject of so much speculation lately, stems from nothing more than a practical joke which has simply gotten out of hand. Since the story surrounding it is somewhat longer than the time here will allow, I will commit to publishing it later in our newsletter so that it will be on record for anyone interested in the facts. The fact is, I do not hold a government ID card. But think about it for just one moment. If I did, does it make sense that I'd pull it out of my wallet and show it to Lee Graham, or anybody else for that matter? Question 5. Is it true that several hours of interviews with a source codenamed Falcon were videotaped, some in the presence of bona fide members of the news media? And is it true, as some have alleged, that those tapes were confiscated by the U.S. government? Answer. Yes, it is true that those tapes were made. And no, it is not true that they were confiscated. They are still in our possession. Question 6. Is it true that I've characterized the cattle mutilation phenomenon as a hoax?
I would love to have him on Noble Truth, but getting a hold of him is a whole other rigmarole. I asked Richard Doty when was the last time that he heard from him, and he said the last time he knew something or knew where he was in Pennsylvania, I think is what Rick said. Currently lives in Pennsylvania, and I think he said something about that he's working at a gas station or something. I don't know if that was Rick just making it up to be derogatory toward Bill Moore, or if that was the truth, but no one's heard from him. No one really knows where he is.
Answer. No. Question 7. Do I know anything about the so-called Ellsworth Air Force Base humanoid case of 1977 and the documents associated with it? Answer. Yes. Some people have characterized this case as a hoax, while others have attributed it to official disinformation. It's my position that this was a special counterintelligence training exercise in the creation and dissemination of disinformation.
Which is pretty much all of it. All of it is military training exercises. The gimbal, the tic tac, all of that was shot in restricted military airspace. It was military craft. Okay, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that it's the military.
Yes, Richard Doty, who was stationed at Ellsworth at the time, was clearly a part of it, but not in any capacity where he would have been responsible for creating the documents involved.
Falcon is the person that Bill Moore is relating to that's in charge of the deception operation that's feeding all these people the information to go out and spread to other people within the community. Bill Moore knows his real name, but he just calls him, I'm pretty sure he knows his real name, but he's just referring to him as Falcon.
Question 8. Do I know anything about
Falcon would be like Richard Doty's boss.
the so-called Whitesell letter? Answer, yes. The letter, which is loosely based upon an actual UFO case, was written anonymously to APRO in July of 1980 by Richard Doty. It is directly related to the Benowitz affair. Essentially, it was bait. AFOSI knew that Benowitz had close ties with the APRO organization at the time, and they were interested in recruiting someone within the organization who would be in a position to provide them with feedback on Benowitz's activities and communications. Since I was an APRO board member, the Whitesell letter was passed to me for action shortly after it had been received. It was not long thereafter that I came to know Richard Doty and began to provide him with information about Benowitz and his case. Question 9. What do I know about the so-called Aquarius document, which purports to be a facsimile AFOSI message with a few spurious additions? I neither typed nor retyped this document. It was created by AFOSI, or at least I always assumed it was, and it was handed to me in February 1981 with the intention that I would pass it to Benowitz. My understanding, although I never knew for sure, was that Benowitz was expected to wave it to the press and others as proof of what he was saying about an alien invasion, at which point the document would be denounced as a counterfeit and Benowitz would be further discredited. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, depending upon one's point of view, it didn't turn out that way. A highlighted version of this document showing the real information and the added information appears in the current issue of our newsletter, which will be available at our table out in the lobby. I might also add that the entire text of this speech is also in there. One additional bit of information about this document is the way that it came to be known to the UFO community. In September of 1982, insofar as I was aware, there were only 3 copies of this document in existence. One of these I had given to Benowitz. A second was in safekeeping, and a third was in my briefcase during a trip which I had made to San Francisco. While there, I had a morning meeting with a man who turned out later to be an associate of ufologist Peter Gersten. That same afternoon, my car was broken into, and the briefcase was stolen. There is a police report, by the way, on file in San Francisco. 4 months later, a copy of that same document, complete with annotations I had penciled on it, turned up in the hands of none other than Gersten himself. To this day,
Wow.
I have never received a satisfactory explanation of how he obtained it.
Wow.
Question 10. What about the AFOSI documents which speak of a 1980 UFO landing near a nuclear storage facility within the Kirtland Air Force Base complex? Are these documents more disinformation, or are they authentic? Answer, to the best of my knowledge, they are authentic. Question 11. What about other documents which I've either alluded to having or have published portions of without providing further details?
Dang, Bill, you don't want to expand upon that one that you think is actually authentic? Tell us about that one, Bill. Nah, we'll skip over that one.
Answer. There are a number of these, and they came to us in several different ways. None of them, however, seem to have any direct connection to the Benowitz case, nor, as far as I can tell, was Richard Doty directly involved in supplying them to us. Whether they are legitimate or disinformation, or more likely a combination of both, is still a matter of question. Once we have completed our study of these materials, we will make them available as well. Our publication of expurgated copies of some of this material also served a definite purpose, but that's another story. Question number 12. UFO basher Phil Klass has been the topic of a number of rumors lately to the effect that he's an active government disinformation agent. What do I think about that? Answer. Mr. Klass is a very...
Oh, and by the way, whenever the date pops up on this this video here, it says 2004. This didn't happen in 2004. It was 1989, but it's being recorded from a VHS player off of another recording. So that title recording is popping up. And so it was copied and recorded in 2004, but the real footage is from 1989.
Very astute individual who has long been a close follower of my activities. Indeed, I believe he was the only one out of the entire UFO community who managed to figure out what I and my associates were up to. And it horrified him. In my opinion, the very idea that someone might actually be capable of getting far enough into the UFO problem to unmask his debunking claims constituted a personal threat to him that had to be dealt with. He has been obsessed with doing everything possible to try to either stop or discredit us ever since. The handout he passed around today to many of you is just another example of it. As to his motives, I think it's best left to Mr. Klass to explain why he behaves as he does. Perhaps Phil bashes UFOs and the people who see them for the same reason that other people tear the wings off of flies. Or perhaps he gets well paid to do what he does. If there's nothing to UFOs, as he's consistently claimed, then I can't imagine why he gets so emotional about them. Unless, of course, it's all part of the script. Phil's been bashing UFOs for over 20 years now. In that process, he's always been very quick to ascribe ulterior motives to the people who report them and investigate them. There are a lot of people in this audience who would be very interested in hearing what his ulterior motives are. Why does Mr. Klass bash UFOs? I, for one, would welcome a rational explanation of just why a man would devote 20 years of his life to an essentially one-man crusade against something which he claims doesn't exist. If he's not spreading disinformation, if he's not on some government or private payroll, then just what is he up to, and precisely what does he hope to accomplish by it?
See, that's the dividing factor between the community. You have people on two opposite ends. One end is like full-fledged believers that believe everything that anybody ever says about UFOs and about the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And then on the other end, the other extreme end, you have people that are like, no, it's all fake, it's all made up. Which there's a middle ground there, which is what I've been trying to expose. No, UFOs aren't fake, but they're not aliens either. They're not extraterrestrials either. It's the middle ground, right?
How about it, folks? How many of you would like to hear what makes Klass tick? I think he owes us all an explanation of what, in my opinion, and I'm sure in that of many others here, has been 20 long years of unprofessional attitude. As a matter of fact, I think he owes a lot of people an apology, myself included. Pages of my newsletter are open to you, Phil. Whenever you're ready to explain yourself, we'll be more than happy to print it. And now, having gotten that out of the way, it seems to be an appropriate place to tell you the story of man's first contact with the Martians. During a worldwide telecast of the Martian ambassador's press conference, the following dialogue transpired. Reporter: "Tell me, Mr. Martian, what sort of social structure do you have on Mars?" Martian: "Well, we're all devout communists. There are no cares or worries in our society, and we are all extremely happy." Reporter: "Well, what's the one thing about living on Mars that makes your people the happiest?"
Good night, Sam. Thanks for being here, my friend. Appreciate you. Have a good night. Know it's super late where you are. Loyal to the foil, baby.
Martian: "Well, that's a very easy question. You see, unlike the people on Earth, we on Mars enjoy the distinct advantage of living in a completely classless society." So moving from the humorous back to the serious, here's question 13. What do I think of Whitley?
That was obviously a joke. He was obviously joking about the Martian.
Strieber and his claims of being a UFO abductee? Answer: At first I was highly skeptical and admittedly somewhat jealous of Whitley. As a result, I undertook to get to know the man in order to assess things for myself. In that process, he's earned my respect, my admiration, and my friendship. Whitley has come very close to the truth in a number of ways, and although still somewhat baffled by his own experiences, he's found a very acceptable way of accommodating them into his life. If one makes a conscious effort to remove Whitley's emotional reactions, and then takes a hard look at the remaining core of information, the result is an insightful look into what gives every appearance of being a real situation. In any event, I certainly wouldn't dismiss this man too lightly. We're going to hear a lot more from him before it's all over.
And I agree with that in the beginning with Whitley Strieber in his book Communion. He was very careful not to call the beings extraterrestrials. He called them the visitors, which visitors could be under the banner of anything. It could be military, it could be spirits, it could be demons, it could be translucent. What is that called? The not the firm. Fuck, I can't think of the word right now, but it could be whatever. In by calling them visitors, he wasn't quick to call them extraterrestrials, but then later on, into the 90s, he started calling them extraterrestrials, and just because it was such a big topic for people to talk about, and that their experiences, it was the gray aliens, it was the extraterrestrials. So he bought into that, and he actually wrote a book called The Greys.
Question 14. Jerome Clark reported in Fate magazine that I and Jamie Chandere made a trip to Washington, D.C. in anticipation of meeting a live alien, and were stood up in the process. Doesn't this imply that we were highly...
I was thinking plasma. Plasma was the right word, plasma beings.
...gullible individuals, and that the experience was probably just a practical joke on the part of the disinformation crowd? Answer: not at all. If you stop to think about it, considering what you now know of our project and its goals, we had a story no matter what happened. We made the trip because we simply couldn't lose. But then there's more to that experience than you know about. Once again, let me caution the hasty pudding crowd not to jump to conclusions until all the facts are in. Question 15. What are my plans for the future? Answer. I and my associates will continue our work and will continue to keep you informed of our results as circumstances warrant. What you've heard today is only part of a larger body of information. Question 16. Assuming they're interested, what can fellow ufologists do to support our continuing efforts?
Can't wait to hear this one.
Answer. First of all, what we're doing takes a lot of time and a lot of money. We have the time. Money's not always available. The easiest thing you can do is to make some contribution to the effort. If not in cash, which by no means do we request, you might want to offer time, research services. You might have information which you feel we might be interested in. In any case, feel free to contact us at any time. 2 years ago in Washington, D.C., I stated we were looking for help. The response was damn few offers and a lot of rocks thrown in our direction. I can say to you now that at last inventory we had plenty of rocks. We still need the help. Those of you that still have rocks to throw, allow me to suggest that they might be put to better use by tossing them at the rumor mongers, or the disinformers, or the incompetents that are presently running rampant.
Yes, please stop coming after the people that are putting out really good information, factual and truthful information, and then giving all of your attention to the bullshit pushers. That's essentially what he's saying there. Stop it. Stop coming after the good people. Go after the freaking deception people.
Those people are the ones that are giving us a bad image. Question 17. What about the so-called Blue Book 13 report? Answer. I think it's best left up to those who are circulating this material to provide the proof of its authenticity. I remain unconvinced of it, but open-minded.
I'm going to have to look up the Blue Book 13 material that he's talking about. I'm not familiar with that.
Which brings me at last to the final section of this lengthy paper.
I know about Project Blue Book and Project Sign and Project Grudge and all that, but I think he's referring to some kind of leaked document that's probably fake.
It seems to me that it's high time I made my position clear about a few things. A lot of people seem to be very interested in knowing where Bill Moore stands. So here goes. Let me begin by stating that the positions presented here are entirely my own. All are based upon
Hell yeah, Noble.
by me and by associates during the course of our project. Some of that has been made available already. Some is provided for the first time in this paper, and some remains to be released at a later, more appropriate time. As to the existence and depth of that which is yet to be released, you'll just have to take my word for the time being. To the best of my knowledge, everything here is true. Indeed, although I confess to having practiced an occasional deception now and again over the years in order to protect the integrity of what I was doing, our goal from the very beginning was to keep things as above board as possible. After all, ours is a search for answers, not an effort to create more mysteries. Position number one is that a highly advanced extraterrestrial civilization is visiting planet Earth and is actively manipulating our awareness of their presence here. Position number two. Elements of at least two of the U.S. government's intelligence agencies are aware of this, and both are presently conducting highly classified, ongoing research projects. I can tell you without reservation that at least one of these efforts, and possibly both, has access to electromagnetic, optical, and infrared signature data which, if released to the public, would provide proof positive that some UFOs represent somebody else's highly advanced technology. Unfortunately, I can't tell you more at this time. I wish I could. Those of you who find me competent and credible will take this as a revelation.
I just did a quick Google search on Blue Book 13. Nothing's coming up in relation to UFOs or even Project Blue Book. I'll have to try and look into it further later on.
Which is as it should be. Those who hold other opinions will continue to throw rocks while loudly demanding at the same time that I deliver proof positive into their hands on a silver platter so that they can call it their own and claim credit for it. Patience, my friends. Position 3. U.S. government counterintelligence people have conducted an on-again, off-again campaign of deception and disinformation about the UFO phenomenon for more than 40 years.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that the government has been organizing and orchestrating a UFO misinformation deception operation for more than 40 years? Huh.
Those who have been responsible for such operations are highly placed individuals within at least 2 separate agencies, and there does seem to be a degree of cooperation between them. These operations involve a large number of people and are well organized.
But it's not a deception operation to cover up the existence of extraterrestrials. It's a deception operation to make people believe that it's extraterrestrials. That's the switcheroo.
They also include the use of phony documents and the recruiting of informants who are able to provide information on the activities of people conducting UFO research or who have had UFO experiences.
It's literally the opposite of what people think that it actually is.
Why is this happening? My experience suggests 5 different reasons. A, the disinformation provides security cover for a real UFO project which exists at a very high level and is known only to an elite few. B,
which is an advanced military, highly classified project to create advanced aircraft.
it is also useful as part of a security process designed to divert attention away from the real but non-UFO related high-tech research and development projects.
Such as that.
C, it is a manipulation by a group of highly placed and well-to-do individuals like the trilateralists who espouse a one-world philosophy and who are using the UFO phenomena in an effort to bring about world unity in the face of an unknown threat from space.
Oh man, you just hit 3 amazing points right there. Holy shit, that UFO alien threat, baby.
D,
which is what they all talk about. All the extraterrestrials are invading our airspace. We gotta protect our airspace. That has come to fruition more than the other 2, but the other 2 come later on.
provides a convenient way to train counterintelligence agents in the techniques of deception and disinformation.
Ooh.
E, it is a manipulation by UFO aliens themselves as part of their plan to gradually make human society aware of their presence.
Highly unlikely, but a possibility.
My position is that the truth is better. Whether
They cut his mic right there.
those people are witting or unwitting tools of this process, I do not know.
They're cutting his mic. trying to tell him to shut up.
Last thing the disinformation people expected, however, is that someone who knew of their activities with the Benowitz affair
Man, I bet those phrases that he was just saying when the mic shut off were golden. Golden. We'll never know.
would pop up after so many years and burst their balloon.
Yes, this was 1989.
Position 4. We have
Thanks for being here. Welcome to the show. Appreciate you. Have a good night. And happy 4th of July, though I don't think that whatever country you're in, you celebrate 4th of July because you're in a completely different time zone that none of those are in the United States. But appreciate your viewership and thanks for being in the chat, my friend.
been able to confirm that there is in fact a group known as MJ-12 which operates at the White House National Security Council level. To the best of my knowledge, this group still uses MJ-12 as the designator. The level of security around this group is such that we have not yet succeeded in establishing whether or not its functions are UFO related, or even precisely how long the group has existed. Along these same lines, none of our sources has indicated any knowledge whatsoever with terms such as Magi, Majesty, PI-40, Plato, Garnet, or a number of other terms currently being spread by certain elements.
Thank you. Welcome to the show.
Position 5. There is, in fact, a Project Aquarius, possibly 2 of them. We have succeeded in obtaining considerable information about one such project in the 1971-73 time frame, and sketchy information about another, which may be a later extension of the first one, in the 76 to 85 time frame. This information includes contract and report numbers, as well as the names of several individuals who worked on the project. More details will be forthcoming later. Meanwhile, it ill behooves UFO researchers to deluge the government with freedom of information requests for details of sensitive high-level projects. This simply alerts the powers that be that you are onto them, and thus makes it all the more difficult to obtain information through other channels. In the rush for me first in the UFO community, we are often our own worst enemies.
He said that earlier too, in part 1 of this that we covered a few months back, that the UFO community is our own worst enemy. We can't agree upon anything.
Discretion is the better part of valor. Position 6. With respect to the controversial MJ-12 papers, these have now been examined by a number of question documents experts, and other research on them is continuing as well, as you've just heard from my friend Stanton. In the case of the Cutler-Twining memo found in the National Archives, I can state with reasonable certainty that it is an authentic document, and the best evidence indicates that someone planted it amidst the papers of Record Group 341, knowing that there was a strong chance we would find it there. With respect to the so-called Eisenhower briefing document, there is still no compelling reason to believe it is anything but authentic. On the other hand, its authenticity remains far from proved. So in the final analysis, the scale remains balanced by the weight of arguments on both sides. If it's the real thing, it's going to take extraordinary evidence to convince even some of the more liberal skeptics.
Well, it has been disproven. The MJ-12 documents was found that the signature of Truman wrote to Vannevar Bush in October of 1947 was copied and pasted onto the MJ-12 document. And it even had like the scribble marks from that another document, from a genuine document that was copied and pasted onto the MJ-12 document that Truman supposedly put his signature on. So not only was the stamp on the document not a actual stamp of a government military document, the signature was also copied and pasted from a real document and then put onto the MJ-12 document. But he didn't know this in 1989.
If it's a hoax, it's extraordinarily well done. Much better than the sort of disinformation I encountered in connection with the Benowitz case. Of course, it still may be disinformation, but then again, it may not. Either way, there's a major story here, and the controversy is far from over. If it's real, it speaks for itself. If it's disinformation, the equally important story of why needs to be told. As for the so-called Truman Executive Order of September 24th, 1947, which is actually the final page of the portion of the Eisenhower document which we have, the analysts have come up with mixed results. Though not yet disproved, this document presents the weakest case of the three. We are working on a final report on this matter, which will include the results of typeface analysis and other processes. It's going to be a lengthy affair. Before leaving it, however, I would like to at least comment on what has emerged as the most controversial aspect of the MJ-12 document affair, that of the date format. There are a couple of points I would like to make. One, if the similarities between stylistic characteristics of the documents and my own writings are important, as some have claimed,
That's right, Tim.
then are not dissimilarities equally important? There are some, you know, even in the way the dates are written. Why do those who go to such pains to point out similarities not go to equal pains to point out dissimilarities, especially when they claim to be using the scientific method? Could it, I wonder, be prejudiced? Or does the word incompetence better describe it? Two, we are by no means convinced that the date format is as critical an issue as others would make it out to be. While the style is admittedly unusual, it is not without precedent. And that, of course, is the bottom line, isn't it? Three, to those of you who still harbor suspicions that I created the documents and am perpetrating a hoax, I say thank you for the compliment. To those of you who think it more likely that I am the innocent victim of an elaborate hoax, I concede that this remains a possibility which has not yet been entirely ruled out.
Hey, he's introspective enough to think that maybe this is some kind of psychological campaign on him as well. Hey, that takes a lot of self-awareness for him to come to that conclusion.
Position 7. The matter of alien abductions of humans is apparently regarded as serious by those within the government who are aware of the extraterrestrial nature of UFOs. This is evidenced by the fact that the government has gone so far as to disinform its own counterintelligence people on that very subject. I don't know.
They're starting to turn the lights off on him. Like, get this guy off of the stage. Turn these lights down. Make him shut up.
Position 8. The secret behind the government UFO cover-up is essentially an awareness of what UFOs are by a few people in high places who have connections with the National Security Council and the White House. Widespread publicity about the abduction phenomenon is an unwelcome in what is already a difficult situation. Within the in-group, there are strong differences of opinion as to whether information should be released to the public and how fast.
Oh, man, I bet that was such a great bit. Oh, man, I want to know what he said about the government disinforming their own agents on the abduction phenomenon. Dang.
Seems to be some consternation about exactly who is in control of the situation. Position 9. Ufology has been stumbling around for 30 years looking for answers. Unless something is done to reduce the petty bickering, the rumor mongering, the name calling, the ego massaging, the power politics, and the personal vendettas which have been taking up our time, sapping our strength, and disgracing our image lately, I expect mainstream ufology will go right on stumbling for a long time to come.
Ooh, man, that statement could not have been any better than what he just said. What would that be? 34 years later? He hit the nail on the head.
I submit, is a society of professional ufologists which adheres to established research procedures and techniques, which maintains a rigorous set of ethics and standards, and which limits its membership to a few whose competence has been appropriately demonstrated. No matter what happens, however, I am committed to completing the process I have begun. I am presently working with a network of more than a dozen individuals, some of whom hold some very impressive credentials. We have been actively exploring the labyrinth of government UFO involvement, and we will continue to do so until we feel the task is complete or that we can go no further. Our group is euphemistically called the Aviary, and each individual uses the code name of a bird as an identifier. We will continue to provide the UFO community with data, and we will continue to proceed in a way which we feel best suits our purposes. A number of people have suggested to me recently that I should defend myself against various allegations and rumors which have been circulating lately. Well, folks, you've just heard the case for the defense. Now reach down inside of yourselves and wrench forth a judgment. I and my group of associates are going to find some answers, no matter what it takes and no matter how long it takes. We are out there digging, and we are going to continue to dig, either with the support of the UFO community or without it. Armchair researchers and hasty-pudding potshot plagiarist ufologists whose only goal is to make themselves look important at others' expense, take note.
Wow.
Those of you who think we're doing a good job and want to be part of that process, please know that we welcome any support you feel you can offer, even if we've had personal differences between us in the past. Those who feel it's all a con game, or that it's all disinformation, can continue to throw all the rocks you want. We're going to go right on without you, just as we always have. In closing, I wish to state that the text you've just heard me read is copyrighted. As such, any use of printed, video, or audio reproductions of this material without permission is prohibited. And
well,
finally,
we're in a completely different time, Bill.
Change of position for me.
Different time, my
In
friend.
the past, I've always been very careful to qualify my statements about the possible extraterrestrial nature of UFOs so as to leave room for other explanations. All the evidence that my associates and I have accumulated to date, however, boils down to two inescapable conclusions. First, there is an extraterrestrial presence here on planet Earth. And second, a small number of individuals within our government know it, but remain undecided as to what to do about it. These two things represent the bottom line. From there, it's only a question of uncovering just how much of the rest of the UFO story is for real and how much of it is bullshit. That is precisely what we intend to do. So either climb aboard and hang on, or get off the tracks. I apologize for having taken so long. If I've offended, that's unfortunate, but I have tried to be truthful with you. I had a lot to say.
You definitely
and it
offended
needed to
some
be
people.
said. Thank you, good night, and farewell.
That was it, folks. That was it. We wrapped it up. We did it. We made it through. And that is how someone is treated that is going out and exposing the mis and dis and deception operations within the community. They attempt to boo him off of the stage and heckle him. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks everyone for being here in the chat. Really appreciate you guys for contributing to the conversation. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel in the algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications, and watch JFKX on Tubi. You can watch it for free on Tubi. My documentary, I'm currently working on the second documentary as we speak, and shows are going to kind of be infrequent here in the next month or two, because I'm going to be devoting a lot of time and effort to creating and making that documentary. So in the meantime, please check out JFKX on Tubi. The link to that is pinned in the chat of this video. And if you're listening on any other platforms, the link to that will be in the description of the video. And happy 4th of July, guys. Appreciate you guys being here with me on the 4th of July and spending this holiday with me. And, keep rolling, baby. Keep America. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you all. And we'll see you guys next week sometime. Bye-bye.